Hello plant people, how are you guys doing today? If you're new around here, my name's Ashley and I'm a soil scientist. On this channel, I like to take that science and apply it to all things plants. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Charles Downing's no-dig garden concept and going through exactly how it works all the way to the positives and the potential negatives of this system. So fun fact about me, this channel, and my creative flow, I actually don't watch a lot of other gardening YouTubers' videos. I follow them all out of complete respect because I respect what they're doing, but I don't want to fall into the trap of making similar content. I want to make content that is unique, and so my cat's gonna totally use that plant right now as a litter box. Jackie. He's gonna have to leave the room. Okay, Jack's gone. So out of complete respect for these other YouTubers, I don't actually view them as any sort of competition. I actually kind of view them as my colleagues, if that makes sense, because honestly, there is so much time in the day, and I know anyone who's into plants or gardening is going to watch all of these YouTubers and all the videos that they put out. So I really don't view anyone as my competition. It just, the way my brain works. But in order for me to give you content that is different, I try not to fall into the trap of watching other people's videos, because you just stylistically will end up like them if that's who you're surrounded by. So I know of Charles Downing. I don't really watch his videos, but someone on Facebook actually asked for a video on his no-dig concept. So I dug a little bit into this gentleman's legacy, which is huge. The guy is way more famous than I will ever be. So I'm just gonna give you the science side of what he's doing, why it's working, but some things that you may want to watch out for. And again, the guy's better than me. The guy has a bigger influence than I do, and I have nothing but respect for this guy. So when I get to the negatives, I am not bashing Charles Downing whatsoever. The man's a miracle worker when it comes to the gardening world and the information that he's provided the gardening world. I think that the concept is great. I just think there are some downfalls and some scenarios where the no-dig garden may not be for you. On this channel, as always, I'm applying science, and with that science, there's no hard, fast stops or starts to any of the information I'm giving you. It's up to you to take this information, digest it, and choose whether or not something's going to work for you in your world. So take everything I say with a grain of salt and apply a bit of logic to it. There's no hard, fast lines in science. Everything's hypothesis and what the science tells us technically, but in practice, it may be very different. If you have a no-dig garden that is similar to what Charles Downing's doing, please let me know in the comments below. His is probably it is the most simplest way to do a no-dig garden, hands freaking down. Some people overcomplicate this, and it's really, really simple. So essentially what he's doing is he's laying out cardboard. The cardboard preferably is not dyed and it doesn't have the shiny top on it. It's just regular old cardboard. You can get this stuff for free, usually from a lot of suppliers, grocery stores. If you just ask to have some of their cardboard recycling, they're going to be more than happy to get it off your hands. In a lot of cases, these companies actually have to pay for recycling companies to come take this cardboard for them. So you're actually saving them money if you ask to take a truckload of cardboard away from them for free. So go ask, it's completely free to do. What he does is cardboard out on the ground. The ground has to be obviously attached to the earth. When I say that, I mean it has to have a soil base to it. So it can be a lawn, for example. It can be on a straight up lawn, or it could be an old existing garden that is maybe heavy clay, or it's just not working in your favor due to the aggregates in it. It doesn't drain fast enough. It's too hard for what you need. Maybe it dries out too quickly. Whatever the case is, non-arable land. So something that you're not able to grow on currently. You'll lay the cardboard out, and what the cardboard does, the sole purpose to the cardboard, is just to keep the weeds down. Keep the weeds from coming up through that manure or the compost that you're going to put on top. An unperceived effect of the cardboard in that first year is actually going to be rapid drainage, because it's going to act almost like a hard pan. When the water hits the top of the cardboard, a huge majority of that water is actually going to run off onto the sides of that cardboard platform that you've made. So it's actually going to aid pretty readily in drainage. Over time, earthworms, bugs, critters are going to decompose this cardboard, and it's just not going to exist anymore. You never have to apply the cardboard to a no-dig garden again. The only time that you would reapply cardboard to a no-dig garden would be if you start seeing weeds. If you're noticing a massive weed issue, then you would put the cardboard back on top of whatever's happening, and then you would reapply your manure or your compost on top of that. The second part to the no-dig Charles Dowding garden concept is actually to put just compost or manure on top. The very important thing that he stresses from the videos that I watched, and what I stress to you, is to make sure it is very properly aged, and hopefully it was a hot compost or a hot manure system that it came from. The reason being is you want to burn off the weed seeds, and you want to burn off any disease that's in that compost or in that manure. You're then just going to simply place that on top of the cardboard. The depth ranges. It kind of depends on what you need. So because you have a cardboard platform, you have soil underneath that cardboard platform, and then you have a layer of manure or compost on top, plant roots are pretty strong. So it's going to be able to dig down into that earth, most likely. The exception to this would be if you had a very hard clay soil. You may not be able to penetrate that depending on what's underneath that cardboard layer. So use common sense. If you can't put a shovel in the ground that you're doing a no-dig garden on top of, then maybe entertain the idea of a thicker layer of compost or manure. If it's very easily dug, like say it's a sandier soil or something to that effect, then you could probably get away with a thinner layer of manure or compost. The main thing is that you have to be able to plant a plant in it. So whether that be seeds or whether that be an actual seedling that you started indoors early, you're going to make sure there's enough soil there to comfortably plant a plant. So that may be a foot, it could be less than that. That is all you need to do. That's literally the entire process. It's very simple. There's no reason to overcomplicate it. That is all that this man does. So this is going to be a very superficial look at the positives and negatives. I don't want to get into too much technical details on this concept without doing a buttload more research, for lack of a better term. So take what I'm saying as a beginner's guide to no-dig. If you guys want more content on no-dig gardens, maybe specifically the Charles Dowding concept, or maybe there's a different concept of no-dig that you want to look at, let me know in the comments below, and I will very happily look into that for you. But on a superficial level, the positives to this entire no-dig concept are that you are feeding the microbes. So we've talked about mycelial fungi, mycorrhizal fungi in videos before. This is going to feed those fungi spores. It's going to feed macro soil bugs. So macro size meaning worms or centipedes or anything of that nature that's actually going to help with the decomposition process, all the way to the smaller micro-sized bugs that we can't see, such as nematodes, fungi, beneficial bacteria, things of that nature. It's going to also feed them. So microbes are going to be very heavily fed, which in a garden where you're digging and you're tilling and all that stuff, you're feeding them if you're adding manure and compost. The difference is that the moisture retention generally is lower because you're fluffing the soil all the time. You're letting in a lot of oxygen, and therefore you're actually aiding in drainage. And soil microbes are designed to be in prairie soils or non-tilled soils. So they are naturally able to live in areas that maybe have less oxygen and higher moisture content. So because of a no-till or a no-dig garden, when you're adding manure to the top, that manure over time and that compost over time will leach nutrients, organic material into the soil profile down below. Now, it's not going to happen immediately until that cardboard begins to degrade. Initially, it's actually going to run off the sides, and we'll get into that a little bit later when we're talking about the negatives. But in the distant future or in the near future, depending on your climate and how fast decomposition happens, your zone, all that fun stuff, you will feed your microbes. The other thing I really like about this concept is that it is making gardening easier for a lot of people. So if you have very unappealing soil, if you have heavy clay, or you have really sandy soil, or maybe you have a patch of lawn where you just can't get the guts to rototill it up, because that's a lot of work and it doesn't always necessarily get rid of all your grass. Your grass will come back sometimes if you rototill, if you don't dig out all the chunks. It is much easier to do a Charles Dowding no-dig garden. So for those reasons, it is very, very, very beneficial. It's also a really great way just to start a garden in a place where a garden wasn't meant to go. So if you're new to gardening and you have a space where you want to start a garden, rather than digging a pit and then backfilling it with landscape soil, consider a no-dig garden where you're actually just going to place cardboard on top of the lawn. Maybe you'll brick up the sides or build a raised bed around it, and then you can backfill that with actual landscape soil. You don't have to use compost or manure. You can use actual landscaping soil. There's no rules to this. I guess if you want to be a part of the Charles Dowding no-dig club, you got to use compost or manure, but it's all going to work the same in the sense of being able to put a garden nearly anywhere. The third thing, which I am huge on because gardening can get expensive, is that there's very low barriers to entry. And when I say that, I mean that the cost is really low and the concept is not hard to grasp. There's not a mass amount of engineering that needs to go into it. It's not like hugelkultur where you have to go collect trees and branches, and it's just a very easy concept that is accessible to nearly any wage bracket, and that part I really, really like. And then the last, and not something he typically talks about, but I would imagine that there'd be less soil-borne diseases, less weeds, less herbicide usage. And that comes from solely the fact that you are always adding a new layer of compost or manure year after year. So say you're adding a foot every year to your no-dig garden. Every year you're pushing all those soil-borne diseases, weeds, seeds, everything. You're covering it with a layer of soil, and therefore it's not going to get the environment or the resources it needs to be able to grow and survive and be happy and healthy and whatever else. So because of that, you're going to notice a lot less issues in that regard. So the negative side of the Charles Dowding no-dig garden, and this is This is my opinion combined with what I've seen in the field as a person who's worked in agriculture, studied the different forms of farming or gardening on larger scales. These are things that you're going to see. Charles Dowding, I've never heard him talk about this, but again, I haven't really followed him either. So if he has talked about these negative side effects, then link the video or the write-up about that down below. But I would say that you're going to see these. There's just no way that he's not seeing these negative things coming up. So let's just go through them. No hate, like I said. This guy's a legend compared to me. I am not slighting this man in any way, shape, or form. I think the no-day concept is brilliant, and I think everyone should try it, especially if you're having issues with weeds, if you're having issues with cost, if you have a poor landscape foundation to work on, then this is the solution for you. But let's just jump into the negatives. So my number one absolute biggest issue with this whole concept is the concept of eutrophication. So I've talked about this before. I've talked about this when I've talked about organic fertilizers. You've heard me talk about this when I'm talking about synthetic fertilizers. It's all the same. If you over apply nutrients to the soil, to the ground, that won't be fully utilized by the plant, then it will run off with the water, because NP and K in particular, along with salts and a whole host of other very essential minerals and nutrients for the plant, macro and micro, are water soluble. They will run away with the water. Now, whether that be through the soil profile down into groundwater, or actually parallel across the surface of the soil into the drains and then into your rivers, your lakes, oceans, etc. and so forth, it doesn't matter, it's all the same. When you're putting a very thick layer of manure and compost with very little to no soil aggregates, something with a high cation exchange capacity that is able to actually store and act as a battery, combined with a cardboard layer, especially in that first year, that is acting almost like a hard pan, or you have a clay soil that is already very hard and the water's just draining off of it, you're going to get runoff, and that runoff is going to have a very high level of nitrogen in it. And that's just a fact. And this is a very big issue around the Great Lakes, for example, in Canada and the US. It's an issue in Saskatchewan, where I am, with farmers. If you're spreading manure and you talk to an agronomist or anyone who works in soil, they're going to give you the recommended rate based on your potassium or your phosphorus needs rather than your nitrogen needs. And the main reason for that is so you don't over apply and cause eutrophication. Eutrophication is very deadly to marine life, freshwater or saltwater. It's very deadly stuff. So I know this is on a very small scale. Like, this is a backyard garden concept. I don't think anyone's doing this on a huge scale, so I don't think it's a huge issue, but it's something to be aware about and something that will happen if you over apply any fertilizer, any compost, or any manure, organic or inorganic. It's just a result of agriculture. The second issue is actually the compost and the manure. If it's not properly aged or it's not properly processed, you will have weed seeds. You will have soil diseases that can affect your plants. Now, I heard in one video when he was talking about putting 3 years aged manure on his garden. And I don't know about the UK and how that works, but in Canada, to get something that's been aged for 3 years, unless you're doing it on your own, it's going to be really, really expensive stuff. So if you're going for just bags of manure, like cheap manure compost, you can run the risk of still having weed seeds, and you can run the risk of there still being some form of disease in there. Like a community compost, for example, you do run the risk of maybe there being some powdery mildew, for example, because that will overwinter in Canada. So there's that's something to be aware of, is the actual quality of the composted manure that you're adding. If you're using this as a way to avoid herbicides or insecticides or fungicides, then you're gonna wanna get a better quality manure rather than the less expensive stuff. My third thing that he's probably not noticing this, and he's not done any studies on this because this would completely go against his entire platform and what he's trying to advocate for, which is great. It's great for carbon sequestration, it's great for the environment, all that stuff, unless it's eutrophication. But otherwise, carbon sequestration, soil life, soil microbes, great stuff. But one thing that he's not maybe seeing or could be happening is a hard pan. So because he's layering and layering and layering and layering, soil's heavy, water's heavy, plants are heavy, humans are heavy. And then if you're driving across it, which I completely doubt he's doing, but any kind of traffic over top of the garden is heavy, and over time it will cause compaction and compaction. And as you're adding a foot of manure or compost every year, you're just compacting the soil beneath it. So what I probably is going to happen, if you were to dig, this is why it's against his rules, if you were to dig this garden up, I would assume the hard pan in that area is going to start creeping farther and farther up in the profile, in the soil profile, rather than the surrounding area. And that's just purely because of weight. A hard pan won't be an issue in a no-dig garden because you're always adding soil to the top, so you're always adding a foot every year. So if your hard pan creeps up by a couple inches, it's not a big deal. But what it will do is over time, it's just gonna change some of the profiles of the soil. It's just something to be aware of. I've seen it in agriculture before, and that's more so because of equipment driving over top. And it's essentially an area, like a dead zone for roots, where the roots will literally come down and then just go completely parallel because they have no way penetrating it. And then last but not least is it's semi-wasteful in my mind. I don't think it's necessary to add a foot of compost and manure every single year. That's maybe just me. There's no way the plants are using all the nutrients in that profile within an entire year. So every year you're just adding more eutrophication, more runoff of nitrates. And you could probably get away with doing it not so often. The problem with that is if you decided, oh, I'm only going to add manure and compost every second year, or every third year you're going to add a foot or 2 feet of compost or manure, you're going to have to dig on the off years in order to plant your garden, because the snow and just the natural progression throughout the year will compact that compost or manure. So you will have to dig on your off years. I would like to see a no-dig concept where it's kind of like a soil aggregate combined with a compost and manure, maybe like a 25% compost manure, 75% soil, and you kind of combine the two, and then you would add that on the top every year, and then you would plant into that foot layer, and then you'd add more, and then you'd add more. I think that would be a better balance between nutrient and then like actual soil aggregate. It would act more as a battery. No, you wouldn't be, feeding the microbes as much, but you wouldn't have as much underutilized nutrient in my mind. Now, I'm not out there taking soil samples, so I don't know what the surrounding water, what the surrounding landscape has for nutrients, bioavailable, available, and what sequestrated into the actual soil itself. But I do think that a hybrid would be better. And if you have the opportunity to use a soil aggregate combined with a manure or a compost, even if it's just a 50-50 or even 25% soil aggregate, 75% compost manure, whatever the case is, I would think that'd be better, just environmentally. And yeah, that's just my thought. Again, this is a very brief look at the whole concept. So it could be completely off. It could be completely wrong. Completely wrong. Maybe I'm missing something entirely. But yeah, that's just my opinion. His yields are much higher, and it's because he probably just has a massive amount of bioavailable nutrients at a perfect pH at all times, super fluffy, light soil because it's just compost or manure. So, I mean, his garden, like the physical view and the yields and all that stuff, it's pretty impressive what he's getting off of them. So I do think it's really great if you're looking for yields and all that stuff. There's just other options. Just keep your options open. Like, this may be the best option for you. And if it is, then yes, use it absolutely. If there's like a hybrid between the two that you could try, then try that. Yeah, it's kind of up to you. I would do a no-dig garden, probably, in my front flower bed. Just because it's really bad soil. It's really hard clay. It's really, really hot. It dries out really quickly. So I would use it there. I wouldn't use it in my raised beds. Yeah, I would use it. Yeah, I'd use it like if I was to set one up on my front lawn. That's 100% what I would do. I would do a no dig. I don't think I'd do straight compost or manure. I think I'd do a hybrid of soil, compost, or manure. I don't think I'd do straight compost or manure. That might be me being completely biased because I like soil. So I'm going to use a soil aggregate because that's what I'm familiar with. That's what I'm good with. The idea of straight compost or manure just really creeps me out from the studies I've seen on runoff water and stuff like that, and the levels of nitrates, potassium, phosphorus, like phosphates, all that stuff that's in runoff water. So that's just me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you want more on the no-dig concept, you want me to dig into it, pun intended, a little deeper, then please let me know and I will do so. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.